All right, everybody, it's 6 o'clock. So you see in front of you the check-in QR code. Please check in if you haven't already. And Andrew will continue to put it in the chat. And I see there's a new message here. Oh, that's just Andrew. Okay. So the QR code is for check-in. And then at the end, we're going to have the sign up for demo day, another crack at the check-in. And I think there's even a third QR code. Not sure what that one's for. Okay, so we're going to welcome back Mark Stiving. Mark has written a couple of books about pricing. He was just telling us earlier, 4 books. Okay, he was just telling us earlier that he's selling this one for $100 and it only takes a half an hour to read. And so that is cutting to the chase and giving people what they want. And executives are willing to pay for it. Oh, okay. So let me read this. Mark Stiving has driven business initiatives worth hundreds of millions of dollars, sought after for his superpower of finding invincible profits in every company he works with. He's an award-winning international speaker known for helping audiences find hidden value and more profit immediately. Mark started and successfully sold 3 powerful companies in the tech sector. And what I love about Mark is when he talks, it's very clear, it's very understandable. You don't feel like you're being talked down to, and he really wants to help you. And Mark, I was trying to let somebody in and I hit mute. So you're going to have to unmute before you take it away.
Got it. Thank you so much. Thanks for talking about that book because I think I'll bring it up a little bit later when we start talking about some pricing things. And it'll be interesting to see how we think about pricing. Okay, I'm going to click someplace that matters. There we go. So today we're going to talk about the foundations of value and pricing. You guys think you're here for pricing, but I'm going to tell you what you're really here for is to understand value. And we're going to talk about why and how that what that actually means, because it turns out that buyers trade money for value. If you think about what you've bought, the last thing you bought, doesn't matter what it is, the only reason you bought it was because you thought you got more value than it cost you in money. That's it. And this is true for all of our customers. The only reason a customer gives us money is because they think they get more value than they have to pay for. And so that's why we're in business, is to create value and deliver that to customers so that we can get paid. And so when we see the sentence, what we should be thinking to ourselves, great, buyers trade money for value, but which buyers, how much money, and for what value? And that's what we're going to talk a lot about today as we go through this session. So this is what I just said. When the buyer gets a lot of value and we charge a low price, the buyer buys. This is what we love. Of course, this is what we expect. But it turns out that every once in a while, they don't buy from us. Foolish, foolish customers. Now, why didn't they buy from us? They didn't buy from us for actually 2 big reasons. If you have ever been a salesperson, if you've ever worked with salespeople, if you've ever managed salespeople, I can guarantee you that every time they lose a sale and you ask them, why'd you lose the sale? The answer is the price was too high. That's always the answer, right? And by the way, they're right. The price was too high. We could have lowered the price to 0 and still probably won that deal. So it's true, the price was too high. But also, the other reason we lost the deal was there wasn't enough value. If we could convince the buyer that there was more value in what it is that we were selling, and they perceived a whole lot of value that was way more than the price we were asking, then they might have bought it. And so every time we lose a deal, lose a sale, it's for both reasons. The price was too high and there wasn't enough value. Now, it's easy for us to say, hey, I'm going to go lower prices. It's harder for us to think about, well, how much value am I delivering? And how do I communicate that value to my customers? But that's what we want to think about a lot is, do we truly understand what that value is? Because when we know the value and when we can communicate the value, then we can win at the highest possible prices, which is what we're after, hopefully. And so I'm sitting here holding I wish I was, but I'm not. I'm holding a cup of Starbucks coffee and I want to sell it and I am willing to sell it to you for only $100. Who's willing to buy it? I don't know. Can I see everybody's chat? I see Maggie's chat. Type in the chat for me and I'll see if I see somebody.
Okay, Britt put in not me. And so did
Okay, I got
Carmen. Are
them.
you seeing those? Okay.
I've got some. Someone's going to buy my coffee for $100. Crystal, man, we're going to have to work on you. Nice, nice. Okay, excellent. Now, can I say most people would not buy my cup of coffee for $100? Okay, got it. Most people would not buy my cup of coffee for $100. But oh, did I forget to tell you that there's a gold coin at the bottom of the cup? Right? Now would you buy it? And the answer is of course. And here's what happened was when I offered to sell you a cup of Starbucks coffee for $100, I hadn't communicated the real value of what was there. And that's what we want to focus on. There's a huge difference between how much value somebody perceives and how much value is truly there. And what we want to do is understand and learn how do we help buyers' perception of value get closer and closer to reality. Yep, CJ, I'm with you. I'll take a couple of those gold ones. That's for sure. Okay, so here's the question for you. What's value? And I'm just going to tell you right now, this is a trick question. This is a hard question. You don't know the answer and you're going to be wrong. So type something in. What is value? Britt, I like that answer. It depends on who you ask. Whatever you assign to something you want. Hmm. The worth of something, the price I pay for perceived value, the current perception at that time. Okay, so these are actually really good answers. They're not right, but they're really good answers, right? And when I say they're not right, it isn't that they're wrong, it's that it doesn't say what value really is, right? Because look, values, it's such a huge ambiguous word. It means so many different things to so many different people when I say that word value. But I want to define it for you because I use it all the time. And we're going to learn to use it all the time. And so here's a great definition of value. Value is the result of solving problems. Value is the result of solving problems. And so what that tells us is that people buy something from us because they have a problem. We help them solve the problem, and that achieves some result. What is that result? That's what value truly is I'm paying you money because I want a result. I buy a Maserati because I want my ego stroked, right? That's the result that I'm after. How many of you are in B2B sales? Anybody in B2B? Or is everybody B2C? We got a couple B2Bs. Nice. Okay. Please tattoo this on your forehead. In B2B, value is measured in incremental profit. If you are selling to a company, the only reason that company buys something from you is because they think they make more money with your product than without your product. I'm sure you've heard of the phrase ROI, return on investment, right? ROI or ROI calculators or business cases, these are all just simply proving this point. And that is companies want to buy incremental profit. That's what they're buying from you. So now remember, value is the result of solving problems. In B2B, that result that they're looking for in the end is more profit. How do you make me more profit? In B2C, we don't have this really nice thing to say, hey, everybody wants more profit. In B2C, we want to feel better. We want better relationships. We want to save time. We want to, whatever it is that we want to do, there's many, many different issues that we're, or results that we're after. But in B2B, we can get it down to we want to make more money. And so look, as a company, you're going out to start a new company. You know why your company exists? You think it's because you want to make a lot of money. That's not true. Your company exists for the sole reason to create value for customers. That's it. Buyers trade money for value. If you want them to give you money, you have to create value in exchange, period. That's what business is all about. Okay, let me pause for a second. Was that brilliant or was that just me thinking I'm really smart? Okay, I like Paula. She's smiling and laughing. Annabelle, thank you for the smile. I appreciate it. Jennifer, excellent. Appreciate it. Okay, so let's jump into pricing and talk about pricing fundamentals for a second. And then we're going to jump into some decisions that you guys get to make or have to make, actually. So the single most profitable pricing strategy is called context-driven pricing. Context-driven pricing has a super simple meaning. Charge what a buyer is willing to pay. That's it, right? Charge what a buyer is willing to pay. Now, it turns out the reason it's called context-driven pricing is because different buyers are willing to pay different amounts in different contexts or different situations. And so it gets complicated, and we're going to try to uncomplicate that for you. But for right now, let's go with this one concept. And that says, I want to charge what a buyer is willing to pay. So what I'm asking is that we're going to put ourselves in the shoes of our buyers and say, what is this buyer thinking? Right? How much would this buyer be willing to pay? Now, obviously, we have no idea what this buyer's thinking. Definitely not that one. But let's do a little quiz, a little study, a little experiment. Let's pretend that it costs you $20 to make something, build something, buy something, whatever it is. You got $20 all in costs. You're about to sell it, and you've got this buyer. You can read this buyer's mind. You know this buyer is willing to pay $100 for your product. If you charge 101, this buyer will not buy. If you charge 100, he will buy. Now, in the chat, do me a favor. What price are you going to charge? It's not like I didn't tell you the answer, right? $100, $100, 99. Angela, you left $1 on the table. So Leanne, I have to tell you that my dissertation, I have a PhD in pricing, and my dissertation was on 99 cents. So I have a empathy for that $99. Um, okay, $100 is brilliant. It's the right answer. It's easy. I'm going to save you from typing it in again, but I want to ask you this question. What if it costs you $50 and the buyer is willing to pay 100? Buy two. Right. So it's still $100, right? It has everything to do with the customer's willingness to pay, not our costs. Okay, now this one really is a trick question. What if it costs you $150? Excellent. Find something else, find a new customer, get your costs down. Beautiful answers. Beautiful. So we're not going to sell to that customer, right? We might do something different. We might go out of business. We might find a new business. We might find a new customer, but we're not selling that deal to that customer. There are two things I want you to walk away from this one concept. Number one, it is absolutely impossible to price better than willingness to pay. You can't do it. Now, granted, you don't know somebody's willingness to pay, but that's for a later conversation. What I want you to do is understand that you cannot do better than pricing willingness to pay. The other thing to notice is cost didn't drive your price. Willingness to pay drives your price. And so when I think of context-driven pricing, there's really three big tenets that we think about and use in this world. One is willingness to pay is contextual. Willingness to pay, your willingness to pay for an umbrella is higher on a rainy day than it is on a sunny day. Willingness to pay is contextual. Your willingness to pay for a new refrigerator is higher after your current refrigerator broke. Right? Willingness to pay is contextual. Willingness to pay is malleable. What that really means is that as a company, we can influence a buyer's willingness to pay. The easiest way to influence willingness to pay is communicate value better. The better we communicate our value, the more buyers are willing to pay us. And here's the one you've been worried about. Number 3, perfection is impossible. You cannot read a buyer's mind. You have no idea how much anybody is willing to pay for anything. It's impossible. But what we do is we take these concepts as a goal, and that's what we're always striving for. Can I better understand how much my buyer is willing to pay? Can I test whether my buyers are willing to pay this? Can I figure out which context buyers are willing to pay more in? And so perfection is impossible. So we don't have to worry about that. We just want to get better and better every day. That's what we're after. I already said these words to you, but willingness to pay is not based on costs, right? My mother-in-law in 1969 bought a house in San Jose, California. She and her husband, they paid $25,000 for it. A few years ago, we moved her from San Jose up here to Reno. I live in Reno. So we moved her from San Jose to Reno. So what do you think we should have sold that house for? She paid 25, so we should have sold it for what, like 27, 29? Yeah, 1.5 million, right? So some really big number because it has nothing to do with someone's willingness to pay. I'm sorry, it had everything to do with someone's willingness to pay and nothing to do with our cost. It didn't matter what we paid for it. All right. We've done one of
Wait,
these.
Mark, you have to tell us. What did you sell it for?
Oh, I don't have to tell you.
Oh, all right. I guess you're
I
right.
think we sold it for 800K. I don't really remember, but I think that's what it was. So, um, so I threw this slide in because we had a really long conversation about these concepts with one of the other Startup NV groups. And Maggie said, "Oh, that was a great conversation. You have to do that again." So here we go. So I want to talk a little bit more about costs and pricing. Right? You heard me say that pricing doesn't matter to costs. Now, it turns out that there's a slight cost don't matter to pricing. Turns out there's a slight exception to that. So now if you have fixed costs, your fixed costs are completely irrelevant to the price you're going to charge. So what is a fixed cost? If you've got to create a business license, if you've got to pay rent for your facility, right? If you've got to buy a car, these are all fixed costs. So I think of a fixed cost as something that I have to pay, but it doesn't change for each unit I produce. Variable costs, on the other hand, are what's the incremental cost to make one more unit of whatever it is I'm selling. So if I'm selling time, if I'm selling my time, then what's my time cost? If I'm selling someone else's time, how much am I paying that person per hour? If I'm selling a widget, how much did it cost me to buy that widget? Right? So these are variable costs because in order for me to sell one more thing, I have to incur more costs. Does that make sense to everybody? You guys are with me? Okay. And so the one exception is if you are in what we're going to call a Tioli market, which means take it or leave it. If you're in a Tioli market, then your costs actually do matter. Your variable costs matter, not your fixed costs. And so here's what a Tioli market is. It's when you set a single price and many, 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 many people say, am I going to buy that or not? So think about a bag of potato chips at the grocery store, right? They set it the price at $1.69, and every shopper walks by and says, am I going to buy that bag at $1.69 or not? And so in that case, we have to think about our costs. And if I raise the price a little bit, I sell fewer units, but I'm making more money. So what's the trade-off there and how much profit I make versus how many units I sell, right? But that's the only exception to the story that costs don't matter. Um, there are two formulas that look very much alike, sound very much alike. Those are margin and markup. I'm going to strongly recommend that you never, ever, ever use markup and that you always use margin. And so margin is essentially your price minus your cost divided by your price. Oh, Joel, we're going to get to that, I promise. Markup is your price minus your cost divided by your cost. Now, here's the difference. If I buy something for $100 and I want to sell it for $200, that means I have a 50% margin or 100% markup. And when you think about markup, by using the word markup, by thinking about markup, you're automatically saying to yourself cost plus. Oh, what's my cost? I want to add 20 points of margin to that. What's my cost? I want to add 50 points of margin to that. And that's not the way we want to think. We want to think, how much is my buyer willing to pay? How much margin will that deliver to us? And so that's the difference between cost plus pricing and charging based on a buyer's willingness to pay. Joel, I can send these to you. You don't have to take pictures unless you want my face in the shot, and then it's okay. The last one on the slide here is a price floor. So I'm adamantly against cost plus pricing because it hurts the way you think about your business. You stop thinking about margin, you stop thinking about value. So I truly want you to think about margin and value. But it is totally okay to say, hey, it cost me $100 to buy something. I am never, ever, ever going to sell it for less than 120. Right? I'm totally okay with that. Put a floor on it, but just don't make that your price. Okay. I tell you what, I'm going to go and then I'm going to stick around for a little bit longer and answer questions a little bit later. So I want to make sure I get through the cool content if that's okay. Because I could see confused faces, and which means I totally messed that up. And so we're going to answer questions later. Okay, let's talk about segmentation. Now, I want to point out that I'm not using the words market segmentation and I'm not using the words price segmentation. I am just using the word segmentation. So in the world of segmentation, you remember I said we want to put ourselves in the shoes of the buyer and understand what they're thinking. But my question then is what this buyer's thinking the same thing that this buyer's thinking? Or the same thing that this buyer's thinking? Or the same thing that this buyer's thinking? And the answer is obviously not, right? They're all thinking different things. And so how do we make sense of this? This is really hard. And so what I want to do for just a moment is I want you to think about use cases for Uber. Why would you ever use Uber? You can type something in the chat for me, please. Why would you use Uber? Lack of a vehicle. Give me more detail. Stranded is good. Food. Yeah, I want my McDonald's delivered. Convenience. Value versus taking taxi. Okay. Ash, I want more detail. Faster than a taxi, so I value my time. Airport convenience, I don't want to park. My car broke down. Excellent. Drive home after drinking. Beautiful. These are awesome, guys. Love these. Love these, right? So here's the question. I'm going to say the words to you. How much should Uber charge? That's a ridiculously hard question to answer, right? How much should Uber charge? And that's because we don't know the context, right? How much does Uber charge to deliver McDonald's? How much does Uber charge to get me to the airport? How much does Uber charge to get me to the town across, 100 miles from here? how much does Uber charge when I have 6 people in the car with me? It's really hard to answer that question because we're just trying to say how much does Uber charge? And you could think about your product right now and say, well, how much did you charge for your product? And I'll say the exact same thing. It depends on the context, right? It depends on who's using it and what problem they're solving and why they want to use it and what they just went through, because different people have different willingnesses to pay and different people went through different scenarios to get there. And so what's the value of your product? It's different based on who the buyer is and what the situation they find themselves in. Does that make sense? You're thinking, Mark, you are not simplifying this at all, right? So let's try to start simplifying this if we can. And I'm going to say something that I will bet you Maggie has told you 20 times already, but we're going through it anyway. We're going to talk about something I call a value architecture. And at the bottom, we're going to get to pricing, I promise. But we have to think about what's the value of our product. And so if we think about Uber for a second, there's all these different people and all these different use cases. And it turns out that there's so many different things you can do with Uber, we got to find a way to make sense of it. Well, the first way you make sense of this is you have to choose a market segment. So Uber actually has 3 different market segments. They have Uber, I'll call it Uber people. That's what you and I getting rides in Uber people. They have Uber Eats, so they're going to deliver your McDonald's to you. And you may not know this, they also have something called Uber Connect. I call it Uber Package. So they'll deliver packages across town for businesses, right? 3 different market segments. You have to pick a market segment, right? You have to think, how narrow can I get my market segment? Because the more narrow you get your market segment, the more you understand the customer, the better you can build a product precisely for that market segment. And by the way, the more money you can charge because you know what problem you're solving. And so the more focused you can be on your market segment, the better, the easier it is going to be to launch your business. So it turns out after you've defined your market segments, what you want to do is for any given market segment, start to think about what's my product portfolio look like for that segment. So if we just think about Uber people, which is probably where we're all most comfortable or most familiar, certainly we have Uber X, we have Uber Comfort, we have Uber XL, we have Uber Rideshare. I live in Reno, we have Uber Ski in the winter. So there's lots of different things you can do with Uber. Right? They have different products in their portfolio to solve the Uber people problem. You don't want to start out with this huge portfolio, but you want to think that's where I'm going. I'm going to end up building a portfolio of products for my market segment. And then for any given product inside your portfolio, you put a price on it. And that price can go up and down. We call this price segmentation. So price segmentation is essentially saying, I want to sell the same product to 2 different people at 2 different prices. Trust me, this is legal and it's doable. Last time you got on an airplane, do you think the person sitting next to you paid the same price for that seat that you did? Right? It happens all the time. When you use a coupon, you get a better price than I do because I don't use coupons. If you're selling B2B and your salespeople are actually negotiating prices with purchasing agents, that means every buyer is paying a different price. It is perfectly okay to be thinking, how do I put a different price based on the customer? And so we've got these activities, these decisions that we have to make, and you absolutely positively have to make those first 2 decisions really well before you focus on the price decision. The price decision doesn't make much sense until you know what's the market segment you're going after and what's the product you're building to serve that market segment. I'm going to pause because I want to hear from Maggie. Maggie, how often do you say focus your market segment, or do you?
I haven't said it too much. We talk about market a lot, but more in terms of the market size, TAM, SAM, SUM. We talk about customer discovery quite a lot, but we don't talk about segmenting. That's the 201 class.
Okay. And in this case, you could also think of it as if you use the words ideal customer profile. In this case, think of it as an ICP.
I recommended a book called How to Create a Customer Persona.
Mm, great. All right. So let's do some fun stuff. Buyers trade money for value. We're going to talk about something called the buyer's value journey. And so imagine we'll do two different things here for a second. We're going to do you thinking, hey, I want to go buy something. And we'll think of, hey, you've got a customer that needs to figure out they need to buy what it is that you're selling, whatever that happens to be. So kind of think in both ways because it's the same story. The question becomes, how do you figure out what you want to buy and how much you're going to pay? That's the journey our buyers go on when they're trying to make a decision. And so we're going to start out with this concept of value and two different types of value that are really important to us. One type of value is called inherent value. What's the value? How much value do you get out of having air to breathe? Infinite, okay? Like everything I got, you can have it. I'm with you. Right? On the other hand, I just captured some fresh Reno air. Anybody want to buy it? Maggie does. She misses it. Anybody buy it? No, come on, come on. Okay, so you just said air was worth everything you own, and yet you're not willing to buy my air. That's the difference between inherent value and relative value. So inherent value is what's the value of solving the problem? What's the value of having air to breathe? Relative value is what's the value of what I'm selling relative to the alternatives. And right now, your alternative is you have all this free Las Vegas air, no matter how crummy it might be. You have all this free Las Vegas air down there, and oh, there we go. But the whole point is this is how we make decisions, right? This is how we value something. By the way, Joel, we're getting really close to talking about competition. So imagine tomorrow morning your significant other nudges you and says, hey, honey, I wish you'd learn to play the guitar and sing me a love song. Doesn't that just pull at your heartstrings? You're like, of course I got to go do that. And so what do? You get up and you go to the guitar store. By the way, you just said yes to the will I decision. I just want to point that out. Then, once you get to the guitar store, you're looking around at different guitars, which one fits better, which one sounds better, what's the price, right? And now you're making a which one decision. When we make a will I decision, we're asking ourselves, am I going to spend money to solve this problem? Do I need air to breathe? Am I going to make my significant other happy? When we're making a which one decision, what are the alternatives? How do I get the most bang for the buck? And so a typical buyer's journey looks like this. We start out with the will I decision. Am I going to buy something in the product category? This is inherent value. This is the value of solving the problem. And believe it or not, people are not price sensitive when they're making a will I decision. And that's going to be important to us in a minute. When people are making a which one decision, price becomes really important. Am I going to buy yours or am I going to buy somebody else's? Well, I don't know which one's more expensive and how much more is it and is it worth it? Most purchases go through both of these decisions. Not all purchases, but most do. So let's do the which one decision first. I want to talk about which one because we think most of our decisions probably happen this way. And so here we've got a can of Del Monte green beans, a can of Safeway Kitchens green beans. Del Monte's $1.69, Safeway's $1.49. Your significant other said to you, "Hey, honey, run down to the store, grab me some green beans, quick. I need them." You get to the store, you have to buy Safeway or Del Monte. Which one are you buying? Type it in the chat, and I promise I'm not going to make fun of you no matter which one you chose. We got a Safeway, we got a Del Monte. Safeway depends on the spouse. How many spouses do you have, Maggie?
I only have one, but if I asked him to buy something, he would buy the most expensive one. And if he asked me to buy something, I would buy the cheapest one.
Okay, there we go. So these are great answers. So I want to, Joel, I want you to talk to me for just a second. Hang on a second. I want to make sure I'm doing this right. Yep. Joel, tell me why you chose actually, you wrote it in here, Del Monte, because it's that's not you, Joel. That's Joel. Del Monte because it's an established brand. Del Monte because I know the name.
Uh, yeah, that's me because I'm using my computer's wife. My,
Okay.
my wife's computer.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So
Uh, yeah, I would buy the money because it's a brand that we have known ever since we were a kid. And if I'm in a quandary, like if I have to make a decision, I think it would be a safe decision to make, even if I pay 20 cents more.
you're more sure of the quality. You're more sure that it's going to be a good product.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Less risk. Got it. Got it. Hang on. I got to find a Safeway person. Olive. Olive, can you talk to me and tell me why you chose Safeway?
Oh, um, Safeway. By the way, Joel's my husband. He's using my computer. Okay, so we
Good.
disagree about this one. Well, I choose Safeway because well, it's a price, and then it in the label it gives me what I'm looking for. It has the values there. The calories, 20, information is there, and it's 20 cents cheaper. So I'd go for that.
Okay, excellent. Annabelle, why'd you choose Safeway?
I'm going with her. For starters, if you're feeding a lot of people, you have to consider price. And for me, it's the same thing. The price is cheaper.
Yep,
And if you're going with that store, it means you've been shopping with the store long enough and you have loyalty with them.
you
So,
trust them. Yeah.
yes.
Okay. So it never really matters to me what you choose. What does matter is how you make the decision. And believe it or not, every one of you made the decision the exact same way. Every one of you said, Del Monte is 20 cents more. Is it worth it? And some of you said yes, and some of you said no. But you all said, is it worth 20 cents more? By the way, I've heard people tell me that Safeway is the exact same green bean in the exact same can, made in the exact same factory with a different label on it. Maybe it is. I have no idea. I really don't know. I really don't know. But here's what I love about this story. It doesn't matter what's true. It matters what you believe. If you believe that Del Monte is a higher quality green bean, you probably would have paid 20 cents more. If you believe it's the same green bean in the same can, in the same factory with a different label, you probably would have bought Safeway. It doesn't matter what's real. It matters what you believe. And so here's the question. How well do we help our buyers know the value of our products? Because the only thing they can make a decision on is based on what they believe. So when buyers are making this which one decision, they're asking themselves, is the more expensive one worth it? right? Del Monte's 20 cents more. Is it worth it? If you want to price relative to competition, which makes sense, what you want to do is say, how much does my competitor charge? And what's the value of my differentiation? How much would somebody be willing to pay me for the things I do better than my competitor? And that gets us towards the price we want to be at. Does that make sense, Joel?
Yep, it does. Thank you.
All right, let's do the fun one. I love this one. Let's do the will I decision. People get to make a will I decision. Now, as I said earlier, sometimes they make the will I decision and then they go on to make a which one decision. But what I want you to do is imagine that there are actually situations where buyers only make a will I decision. They never make a which one decision. And so popcorn at the movie theater is a great example. Last time you went to the movies, after you walked in the door, you asked yourself, am I going to take out a mortgage today for popcorn or not? But there's no competitive alternative. You're going to buy popcorn there or you're not going to have popcorn. Right? And that's why it's so expensive. Imagine you're driving out in the middle of nowhere and you glance down at your gas tank. You've got an eighth of a tank left. You see the sign that says last gas station for 75 miles. You pull off. The price of gas is 4 times the price as it is in the city. Are you buying gas?
Yes.
There's no competitive alternative. Here is my all-time favorite example. The iPhone. If you use an iPhone, then my guess is right now you are asking yourself, should I upgrade to the new iPhone 16 or not? But what you're not thinking is, should I upgrade to the new iPhone 16 or switch to Android? In your mind, there is no competitive alternative, which is why Apple gets to charge ridiculously high prices for their products, right? If you care, Android has 72% market share worldwide in the mobile phone marketplace. Apple makes 85% of the profit worldwide in the mobile phone marketplace. Do you see Paula's jaw just drop open? It's insane, but that's because they have the ability to charge more because they know their buyers are not looking at competitive alternatives. They do not have the competitive price pressure. And so hopefully you get this point. Price does not drive a will I decision. Something else is driving that decision. And here's what that means to you. When a buyer is not looking at a competitive alternative, price is not driving their decision. You do not have to discount. If you can identify these, you could probably be charging a higher price. If people were only making will I decisions and you raise your price 10%, it'll have zero impact on your demand. So you're thinking, Mark, how do I do this? I want will I products. Could I please? So it's not quite as easy as it sounds. But when we think about will I decision, so a buyer is going to make a will I decision, what we want to be able to do is recognize when this happens. So we could have products that are will I products, meaning most of the time people only make a will I decision. So we talked about the iPhone already. Your electric utility, my guess is that you only have one place that you can buy electricity from. And so your choice is, am I going to buy electricity or not? And the answer is usually yes, I'm going to buy electricity. But here's a good one for you. If you can sell a product or even give a product away and then sell an upgrade, sell an add-on or an option, that add-on or the option is typically a will I decision. People are asking themselves, am I going to buy this? But there's no competitive alternative. Then we have will I situations, right? Think of this as context again. And so when we think of these will I situations, popcorn at the theater, well, we know there's lots of different choices for popcorn at the grocery store, but when I'm in the theater, I only have one choice. So it's the situation I find myself in. Last gas, we know that when you're in the middle of nowhere and there's only one, that's the situation I find myself in. How about relationships or referrals? If you have a past client that changed jobs or changed companies, oftentimes they'll come to you because they trust you, they like you, they know your stuff's going to work. What about a referral? Someone says, oh, you really should buy from Annabelle. Maybe they're not going to go look at anybody else and they're just going to buy from Annabelle. What we want to be doing is watching and learning from our customers. Are they looking at competitive alternatives? When do they look at competitive alternatives? Because if they're not, then we don't have to be worried that much about price. We can start raising prices a little bit. But if they're looking at competitors all the time, then we need to clearly understand what's our differentiation and what's the value of our differentiation. Okay, I'm going to pause. Do you guys have a question or two? I have one more really amazing piece of content, but at least if I say so, it's amazing. But but I just wanted to answer any questions because this stuff is hard.
I have a question.
Please.
Okay, so basically, it's kind of like the story that you tell and kind of like the picture that you paint for the people, for your customer, basically. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
How we get like, I mean, how we can make our prices based on the value?
yeah. So what I'm saying is, how well do we explain value to our customers? And this last piece of content I'm going to share with you is how to do that, right? How to think about what's the value to my customer.
Okay, type kind of like what do they value? What type of things do they value?
It's exactly right.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, let's do that, and then I'll stick around and answer questions about pricing or value or whatever you want. Doesn't matter. Okay, this last concept is a tool that I use a lot. It's called value tables. And this is, I'm going to say your buyers don't actually think this way, but they should. And when you can think this way, you can then communicate much, much better with your customers. And so with a value table, we've essentially got four different columns. Those four columns are the solution, the problem, the result, and value. The solution is your product. The solution is a really cool feature of your product. It's something you built because you think your customers are going to love it. Well, why'd you build it? Because it solves a problem for your customer. Can you learn to articulate what that problem is? And I'm going to tell you that that's the hardest and probably most important of the four columns that we're going to talk about here. Right? If you can learn to articulate the problems that your customers are solving, now you know how to talk about your product. Now you know how to talk about your value. If you have a customer who has a problem that you solve, they buy your product, they solve the problem, they achieve some result. What's the result they achieve? In the world of B2B, that result should be a KPI. It's higher conversion rate, higher sales rate, higher ASP, higher, faster production, less downtime. fewer absentee days, right? I mean, it depends on what it is you're selling, but what's the KPI that your customer would use to measure the effectiveness of your product? And there could be lots of them. And then the value column only applies, but by the way, we do the results columns for B2C. It's just the result is typically more emotional. It's not quantitative. On the value side, what we're going to do there is this only applies to B2B today. And you're going to take whatever the KPIs are that you're going to move and say, if I can move this KPI from here to here, how much more profit does that make my customer? So we're going to use business acumen to figure out how much more money we make our customers. Because you may recall we started today off with buyers trade money for value. Value is the result of solving problems. And in B2B, value is measured in incremental profit. And that's what we do here. So I can't walk you through and teach you how to do all of this today. We don't have enough time, but I want to give you an example. And it's a really cool, it's a fun example, actually. And so we could talk through this. I was working with a company that sells the technology for drive-throughs at fast food restaurants. They've got about 80% market share. And they had a long-range communications radio. And I got to tell you, I was lost. Why the heck do you need a long-range communications radio at a fast food drive-through restaurant? And it turns out that they solve a problem. I mean, why else would you build a product? Because it solves a problem. Well, what's the problem? Well, our drive-through lane slows down when the customer has to wait for us to prepare for food. So imagine you are the McDonald's manager and you would say these exact words. This is a problem that they can help solve. So if McDonald's has this problem, they buy our long-range communications radio, what's a result they could achieve? Well, it turns out by taking orders at the edge of the parking lot, we have more time to prepare the food, resulting in 2 more cars per hour during peak times. Notice we just used a KPI, a key performance indicator. We're going to get 2 more cars per hour during peak times. What's the value of that? Well, if I can get 2 cars through, I do 3 peak hours a day, 360 days a year, $10 a car. We get 60% margin on our food. That's $12,960 per year of additional profit because I bought a long-range communications radio. Can I just say that's really cool? If you can learn to do this for your product, go ahead, Maggie.
What does the radio cost?
I have no idea.
Oh,
I have no idea. But here's the really cool thing. You didn't need to know the price of the radio to get to where we are. Right? So now that I know where we are, I could say, oh, you're going to make $13,000 a year. You'd probably easily pay, you'd probably subscribe to me for $1,000 a year on that, wouldn't you? And I have absolutely no idea how much it actually costs to build a long-range communications radio. But I'll bet it's way less than $1,000. By the way,
but Mark, what was the customer willing to pay?
okay, fabulous question. And so I came up with $1,000 because of this incremental profit that I said I was going to make them. Right? And so a really good rule of thumb is you can get 10% of the profit that they're going to achieve. Now, it turns out if you can reduce the risk and they're more assured of getting it, you can get higher than 10%, but 10% is a really good number to think about. Now, by the way, it has to be important. The buyer has to believe that number. Chosen no, 10% of the expected incremental profit. By the way, this one solution can solve many different problems because there's also a problem that says when customers wait in line, a long line, they sometimes drive off meaning we lose business. But if we take the orders at the edge of the parking lot, customers are less likely to drive off, resulting in one more car per hour during peak times. So that's just half of what we had up above. So now we got another 6,400. So now maybe I'm going to make you $19,000 a year. And now maybe you'd pay me $1,900 a year. What I want you to take away from this is the power of thinking from the customer's perspective. Right? What's the problem that you're solving for your customer? And what's the result they're going to achieve? Now, my guess is you've all bought computers in the past, right? And so if you were to read these specs, you probably could say, yeah, this is a good enough computer for me, or no, this isn't a good enough computer for me. You probably know enough. But what do you think would happen if your grandfather walked into Best Buy and the geek behind the counter said, hey, we've got a Dell Inspiron 3020 desktop, 13th generation Intel Core i5, 8 gigabytes of memory, Intel UHD graphics, 735, 12 gigabytes. Your grandfather says, yeah, but can I see my grandkids over the interwebs? There's a huge difference between experts and non-experts. Huge. Experts can read those specifications. Experts can listen to your features. You can tell them about your product, and they know what it does for them and if it solves their problem. Non-experts don't. Most of the time when we sell to new customers, they are not experts in our product. And so if I come back to this concept for a second, problems and results are what matter to your customers. If you try to sell your features, you better only be selling to experts. Oh man, look at that. It's 7 o'clock. I've got 3 slides. Here we go. So buyers trade money for value. This is all summary at this point. Buyers trade money for value. We've heard that 100 times. Which buyers, how much money, and for what value. And so when we think about value, we really and truly need to go down this value architecture. You have to pick a market segment. You have to pick an ideal customer profile. You have to be specific on who you want to go sell to, and then build a product for that person, for that ideal customer. And then we can price it based on how much value are we delivering to that customer, because we understand that value. That's where the value architecture comes into play. And so what we're trying to do is make sure we're communicating that gold at the bottom of the cup. That's what we're after. That's all I got. I'll take any question. I'll hang out for a bit if you guys want to just ask random pricing questions about anything.
Thank you, Mark. Excellent as usual. I see Joel is raising his hand.
Go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, I was just wondering, the examples you gave us are actually quite complicated examples, ranging from a cell phone to a system wherein you have to invest in something. What about if they were just ordinary, everyday consumer products? Can't you just base your price on what the competitor is pricing their products on, so that you know already that is already acceptable? Then if you have an added value to it, maybe you can raise your price a little bit more, but basically base it on competitors' price.
Yeah. So if you're going to sell something that there already is a lot of them, okay, you're going to launch a new can of green beans, right? And we know that there's green beans out there already. What you might do is you might look at how much does Del Monte charge, how much does Safeway charge, how am I better or different than them? But now what you have to do is when you say, look, I'm better than Del Monte, I should be able to get a higher price. You have to articulate, how are you better than Del Monte? Your buyers have to believe that you're better than Del Monte. Right? And so really pricing comes down to how well can we communicate the value of what we do. But you're absolutely right. When we sell something where most of the time people are buying from based on a competitive alternative, then we can start with the competitor's price and then move up or down based on our differentiation.
Okay. Thank you.
Andrew has a question. Go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, hi guys. Just a heads up, the codes on the presentation are not accurate, so I put them in the chat.
Oh, the QR codes. Okay, thank you,
Yes.
Andrew.
And they're also on Disco.
Okay,
They're
excellent.
in Disco. Okay. There is a question in the chat though, Mark.
Oh.
Carmen is saying, I have a question more for you. Would it be helpful to use what we learned in the beginning, i.e. surveying people, yes, customer discovery, to ask them what they would be willing to pay and why in regards to pricing? Yes, so we have a two-part customer discovery process. And the first one is like, did you ever notice this problem and how do you solve it? You know, the whole thing. And it's at the end of the customer discovery, say, okay, now that you know what your customers want and need, you can develop a value proposition. But yes, defining the different customers you can get your first inkling about who your different customers might be during the customer discovery process.
And you start thinking about problems, assuming that it's the way you just said it, Maggie, right? If you're thinking about what problems do you have, how are you solving them today, that's exactly the way you want to be thinking. And then if you want to ask, everybody write this down because it's not in my presentation. So when I send it to you, you won't have it. If you want to ask the question, how much are you willing to pay? Please don't ask that question. Look up something called Van Westendorp. That's enough. It'll get you there. But Van Westendorp's price sensitivity meter, he says you're going to do 4 questions. So after you've described the product, you've treated it almost like a salesperson, then what you're going to do is ask the following 4 questions. You don't have to write these down because you'll be able to see them when you look it up on Google. The 4 questions are, at what price do you think this is so expensive you wouldn't even consider it? At what price do you think it's so cheap the quality couldn't be very good? At what price do you think it's starting to get expensive, but you'd still consider it? At what price do you think it's a good deal, a good purchase? And so those 4 questions, they kind of hide the fact that you're doing a pricing study, and they start to narrow in what's the range of where you should be in your pricing, in your price points. Thanks, Noah.
All right, Mark, thank you for joining us tonight. It was a really good presentation, so much information. Really enjoyed it again. And so, Mark, if somebody has a question that they didn't want to ask in front of other people, is there a way for them to get in touch with you?
So first off, all of you are welcome to send me a LinkedIn invitation, as long as you don't spam me afterwards with a sales thing. I'd appreciate that. But you're welcome to send me a LinkedIn invitation. I'll say yes. And then you can always send me questions on LinkedIn.
Can you repeat those 4 questions?
I can, but it's easier for you to grab them off of Google. So there's a link in the chat right now that someone wrote for Wikipedia.
So under the approach, those are questions in there? Yeah, a little hard to see.
Oh,
Okay, excellent. Yes, and we try to have them be very careful when they're doing their customer discovery, not to lead them down a path of what the price should be. We have them ask, okay, if you would be willing to buy it to solve your problem, how much would you pay? What do you think other people would pay? We have them asking very open-ended questions like that because for the first round of their questions, they may not know what it actually costs to make the product. And then they're supposed to go back and collate all the information and start doing some pricing and figure out, okay, what is it going to cost? Because the next time they show their doohickey to people and say, I was here a couple of weeks ago and I was asking people about this solution to the problem. Do you think it would solve the problem? If you think it solves the problem, would you be willing to pay? We ask them again, because sometimes just seeing it increases the value that they would pay.
yep. So the first time you said that, Maggie, I liked what you said. So I try really hard to never ask the question, what would you be willing to pay? Because people want to game the answer to that question. They don't, A, they don't know, and B, they try not to give you an honest answer for whatever reason.
Hmm.
But you did give the right question after that, right? So the best question to ask, if you only want to do one question instead of these four, is how much do you think other people like you would pay for this?
You think that gets to a more honest answer?
They game the answer less.
Huh, okay. With the PhD, especially in pricing, comes a little bit of psychology too.
A tad bit. Just a tad. Mhm.
Okay, well, we haven't lost a ton of people, so maybe there are more questions out there. But there are many people that are thanking you in the chat so
I
much.
appreciate it. You guys are very welcome. Maggie, come up with a hard question for me.
If you are making something truly unique because you're an artist, how do you know where to start your pricing?
Oh my God, talk about hard things to price. Here's the thing about art is we ended this with the value table, and I said, how much value are we creating for our customers? And in the world of art, it is so hard to say, here's how much value we're creating for somebody, right? Because an individual says, oh, I love that, I want that, I want to put that in my house, I want to look at it every day, or they don't. And it's so hard to know the answer to that question. So
Yeah, so how do you develop a customer persona? So say you are able to sell something, your first piece of art, or it's the fifth one you made, but you got somebody to buy it.
is
And they spent, a decent amount of money. Let's say they spent a couple hundred, right? So it wasn't an impulse buy. They had to think about it. How do you go about defining your customer through the ones who have already purchased?
well, first off, I think that one statement was really smart. You want to find your customer based on the ones that have already purchased, right? To find your ideal customer. Um, if you can go back to those customers, you essentially want to say, why did you buy? Right? What caused the purchase? And they're going to give you an answer that has to do with what the problem they were trying to solve was. Right. And it could be, they might say, hey, I think it looks great in the living room, or they could say, hey, I've got 4 kids and it reminds me of my 4 kids. And we say, great, we're going after families with 4 kids. Right. I mean, it's hard to know what drove someone to make that decision, but that's how I would start is I would just go ask them, why'd you buy?
And what if they say it made me feel a certain way?
I didn't really mean to ask hard questions, Maggie. No,
You wanted the softballs at the end?
I'm just joking. So there are some things where it's just trying to get the right price from a questionnaire or from asking questions is really, really hard to do. And instead, what we're going to do, if I were in that person's shoes, whoever it is that's making art, and I've sold 4 or 5 of them at this point in time, what I would be doing is raising prices every time I sell one, right? Because now what I'm doing is I'm actually testing the limits of my marketplace, right? How far will it go? What can happen? And what you might consider doing is creating 2 versions of your product. Now I'm going to make this up because I have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. But imagine that you've got, we're going to talk about paintings. And you've got a painting that is, you always make them a specific size, but I'm going to make one that's a little bit bigger and I'm going to sell it at a higher price. And I'm going to make one that's a little bit smaller and maybe sell it at a lower price. And now I'm going to see if I can start doing price segmentation with my products to say, oh, I can get people to buy the bigger one and pay me more. So I would start testing it and thinking that way. And there's something about the art that's common. There has to be. Because if there's not, then there's no theme to tie a price around, if that makes sense.
Well, art is so subjective. I would think that if we've got a few sales, that we should be having parties where we ask the people who have purchased to bring their friends who are like them to these parties to come and see the art and see if you can expand your customer base that way.
Sure.
But also asking them why they bought.
Oh, this is the link here? Jeez Louise, what a great URL.
Oh God. Thank you. Yes, this is my website. Thank you, Maggie, for those questions.
You're welcome. They come up all the time. And it's because when we talk about pitch decks and we're talking about, okay, what's the problem? What's the solution? With art, you're moving towards pleasure. With other products, you're moving away from pain, right? You're trying to solve a problem. But when it's artistic or experiential, it's like you're moving towards pleasure. And that is harder to define.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, thank you, Mark, for that. And Maggie, you exactly defined the issue I have all the time with my work. I've been working freelance now for almost 3 years, and I've had a constant cycle of clients, thankfully. But with the economy slowing down, it's been harder to convince people to do something extra like artwork, even though people do understand conceptually that art is important. So I'm now trying to like figure out what are some other logical ways to like convince people that the art will actually add value to their businesses or their overall lifestyle. So yeah, any insight is so welcome.
Well, I think now since we're in a time of, let's say, it's not really turmoil, but like these are uncertain times. And so having something beautiful to make you feel better is always worthwhile.
So true. So true.
So let me make a suggestion, Louise, just for kicks. Create one or two products and put a really, really high price tag on them.
Yeah, would so I that's a good question. I've actually started vending, so selling my artwork in markets locally. Um, and I do have high dollar services like murals, which are 4,000, 3,000, 5,000. But then selling really like art prints that are like $10, $15. I've also considered doing workshops and I'm starting to test that out this year too. Um, However, it's the consistency. I think it's that. It's how do I sort of build that consistency? And
Yeah, I have no idea how to build consistency in art, but here's what I would suggest. As I'm looking at these pictures, right? So if you were to take one of the standalone pieces, not make a printout of it, but paint it on canvas and put $1,000 price tag on it and take it with you to the markets.
yeah, I can definitely test that out. I haven't brought up originals at the markets, so I have, yeah, I might do that.
And even if it doesn't sell, the act of you having $1,000 piece there makes people think you're good. Makes people think other people pay
Mm,
$1,000 for your artwork.
that makes sense. The perceived value.
Mhm.
Hmm. Okay, yeah, I'll try that. I'm usually at Market in the Alley and doing local gallery things as well, so I'll test that out.
Cool. Guadalupe has her hand up.
Yes, I have a question. Okay, I like in your presentation is very good, but how how a business, okay, this is a new business, how you can prepare the business for different phase, like when the business when the economy is booming and when the economy is suck, when the economy crash. So I would like probably if you can address a little bit, or we can have another training about that and how we can prepare for any event like that.
Yeah, I'm going to let Maggie answer that. I have no idea.
Thank you
Uh,
for your presentation. It's very good.
You're welcome.
Well, Guadalupe, that's the challenge of being in business. Like, how do you see what's coming down the road? You have to keep
Oh,
cash in the bank. You have to prepare. You don't want to sell too low, right? You can put
yeah.
stuff on sale if you need to cover the rent or something, but yeah, it's a struggle. It's being in business.
If you're thinking about the long-term economic impacts, one thing you might do is continual forecasting, and
Okay.
you always create three business models, right? So one is your expected, what do I expect to happen? You create a bunch of expectations that the world falls apart, and you create a bunch of expectations that the world booms. And how would your business be different in each one of those three business models?
Okay, thank you. And you and Maggie and I don't know, you can teach about this model you're talking about because I have one which I implement in my current work or business. I can say it's business. But I would like to know because it's important. Reserve, yes, you can have reserve, like okay, because the three first years, any business is not going to make money. You have to build reputation. You have to build clientele. You have to sell the product, make sure people like him. So it's hard work for the first 3 years. So I would like to know a little more of the model if if it's possible in future classes.
Well, we're going to have a talk on supply chain. So continuously looking at your cost of goods sold, the things that you have to build your product, whatever it is. You don't want that to get away from you. You want to keep on top of it. It's I mean, it's just a way of thinking about, okay, if how many absolute customers do I need to survive? That would be like in the worst case scenario. In the best case scenario, would you be able to hire more people who could add more features to whatever your product or service is? So you're just thinking in terms of this is the basic plan, the one that you know, your model, and then trying to plan for horrible things happening and trying to plan for wonderful things happening.
Okay,
And
it's mean like you have to have in three different business plan because the basic okay is the first business plan, which is going to be the basic, and then I can creating another business plan, and in the event the economy crash, and we go to a horrible recession, worse than what we have now, and then I can create another business plan when everything is booming and I make profit. This is what you mean?
yes, it's planning, yes, or different scenarios.
Okay, thank you. Well,
Sure.
it's good to know that you have to have a three business plan. What about, I'm not sure I'm going to ask you, what about in the future, if it's possible to study each business plan? Because that one is they make as a business owner is helping more and become more creative.
Mark, can you think of any books that might help her?
I cannot.
Hmm.
I cannot.
We only have 10 sessions to get through what we teach. So we've been doing it for a little bit now. So we're trying to give a well-rounded course on it. And we can't go into business plan development as it's too big a topic to do in one of the 10 sessions.
Okay.
So Sherry, you have a question?
Yes, yes. Hi, Mark. It's a very information. The PowerPoint you shared is really great information. Thank you for that. I have a question. So, like, if you are selling, like, if you are like an expert and you're selling stuff to the, I think, expert customers, like, how do you convey value to non-expert, right? In your example, you have the Dell memory right example. So for those people who are non-experts, so how, but you're still selling that product. So how do you convey value to the other people?
Yep. So do you remember on the value table, we had the solution, which was the features, and that's how we talk to experts, or at least experts can understand that. And then we had the next two columns were problems and results. Everybody cares about problems and results. Everybody does. And so non-experts get it. If we go back to the grandfather example that I was using, what's the problem? He wants to be able to talk to his grandkids over the internet, right? Oh, great, we solved that problem. And so if you were trying to find value for the grandfather, you'd be talking about talking to your grandkids over the internet and seeing their faces and, you know, having real time being part of their life. And so you get the problem and you don't have to talk about the technology or the features or anything. In fact, you could create an entire value table without ever putting in a feature. And all you talk about are the problems you solve, the results your clients would get, and the value if it's B2B. Did that help? I can't hear you. I'm so sorry. I can't hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Better.
Okay, so a follow-up question is, let's say your product is kind of high-end, and now you're selling to non-expert customers, then how do you figure out like what's the price they're willing to pay?
Yeah. So tell me what your product is. That might make it a little easier for me.
So like I have this workforce consultation company. Basically I provide like a workforce training, grant support. Because like I am actually established in the field, so people who know my work, they know what value I can bring to them. But for other people who don't do grants or they are new to this, they were wondering like what value you can bring to me, right? So I've tried to like convey that message, like what this is what can bring to you. So that's I think that's where I was come from.
Yep. And so when you work inside a company, when you're selling to a company, you probably are dealing with several different, we call them buyer personas, several different people inside the company. And each one of those people has a different set of problems that they're trying to deal with, right? So you're probably dealing with human resources. And so they've got a learning and development budget, and you've got to find a way to fit in the budget and talk to them about learning and development. And then there's someone who actually cares about the performance of the employees and what it is that you're doing with them. And so that's probably a VP or director level someplace. And you've got to understand what that person's problems are and how to talk to that person about their problems. And so when we go back to the value table concept, I think in terms of those problems and results all the time. And everybody you talk to has a set of problems that you can go address, that you can help solve. And that's what you want to start organizing is when I'm talking to someone in HR, these are the problems I'm going to talk about. When I'm talking to someone in learning and development, these are the problems I'm going to talk about. When I'm talking to a director of production, these are the problems I'm going to talk about. And so that's the way you want to think about it when you're selling inside a company. But by the way, the willingness to pay, I didn't get to that question. If you can do what I just described well and work with each of those different departments, you should be able to have said, okay, when we solve your problem, how much more money will you make? And so we start to figure that out. And as we know more and more how much how much money they're going to make because they have our product, now we have the ability to start estimating what price could I charge in order to get them to buy from us.
I see. Thank you. That's very helpful.
You're welcome. Paula. Paula left us. She put her hand up and left.
She went off camera, but I think she really does have a question. Paula, time to come back. Okay, anybody else got a question before Paula gets back?
Yeah, I do.
Go for it.
So, I just following up to the kind of market conditions question. do you have, I know we only have a certain amount of time, but do you have any recommendations for resources for kind of strategic pricing when to either if you're trying to gain market share, you lower your price under your competitors, or if you are seeing the demand increasing or decreasing, how to kind of get ahead of that with your pricing models?
So I'm not sure I can give you a book that does that, but I can give you a really good answer for something that I highly recommend, and that is unless you are launching a brand new product, I would not think about getting market share through price. Right? If you've got a product that's on the market, then you should be focused on marketing, communicating value, differentiation, all of these other ways that you have the ability to go gain share. But I would not be dropping price. What ends up happening when we lead a price increase is oftentimes our competitors just follow us. And what we did was we hurt industry profits without any of us making more money. So I am not a fan of lowering prices unless the only time I ever recommend lowering prices is if your competitors lowered price and you have to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mark, I'm not going to keep you at 7:30. Thanks.
Fun.
Yes, it was fun, and I really appreciate your joining us for such a long period of time.
No worries, no worries.
Really
Thank you so
appreciate-
much.
Good luck, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate you.
Okay, see you Wednesday, guys.